Oh my God. I'm gonna make
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee meeting for April the 6th, 2022 to order. We do apologize for the delay. We had a little technical difficulty that we're currently working through. Ms. Carrillo, if you will, please call the roll.
Livingston. Here. Barron.
Here.
Newton.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next order of business is approval of minutes from February the 15th, 2022. You can find them on pages 3 through 7.
Move to approve.
Were there any changes or any modifications we need to make to our minutes? Given none, Madam Clerk?
Livingston.
yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Our next order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Brown, do we have any changes?
No, Madam Chair, no changes requested.
Madam Chair.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Livingston.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Our next order of business is items for discussion. And I want us to just kind of to remember our last meeting that we had was a work session with full council, where I found that it was very helpful for us to just take some time and to look at where we wanted to go with prioritizing these funds as we expend them throughout Richland County. And so at this time, Mr. Brown's going to give us an overview of the priority categories that council members have said that this is where we want to spend our money. This is where we want to invest. Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, that's correct. And as a part of that review, also included in that is information that I was sharing as a part of what does the administrator need to provide to this group related to these ARP dollars. So specifically speaking, I'll start with the fact that there was a survey that was done. There were a number of respondents to that survey, recognizing that we have hundreds of thousands of people in Richland County, and we had less than 1,000 respond. The respondents that responded to the survey talked about these top 10 categories as important to them. Services for abused and neglected children, street improvements, mental health, support services, transitional housing, emergency shelters, permanent housing, broadband infrastructure, services for domestic violence, and then veterans. The council through the committee, talked about a list of items as well. And that list of items was discussed during the last work session. It was talked about, and some of these things were overlap. Youth services, parks and recreation, small business, mental health, workforce training, student loan payments, trust funds and incentives, water and sewer infrastructure, senior assistance, broadband, food insecurity, home repair, homelessness, public safety, crime prevention. And there had also been some previous discussions about the importance of providing technological resources to address our citizens being able to interface with the county in times of situations where they cannot necessarily be in person. And so for just the next few moments, Madam Chair, I'll talk a little bit about how I developed what was presented to you and communicate to those of you who are here and those who are listening, how it does not represent all of the needs that the county has. And I'll talk about the difference between the needs and then the recommendations that have been made, just to kind of provide a little clarity. So one of the things that I want to point out is that the county, through a number of years, even prior to my tenure here, had already identified a number of areas that it was important to be funded. Some of those things are represented in these recommendations and considerations, and some of them are not. So, for example, one of the things that is represented here is synonymous with some of the information that both the council talked about was important and the community, and that's something is the DSS facility, which represents a way to support a number of these initiatives that folks have needs for when it comes to our community. One of the things that's not listed on here, but is a need, is, for example, the Emergency Operations Center. The county went through a process years ago and identified the need to update and move its Emergency Operations Center to support emergency management services and emergency management department. That request was not put into these numbers, but that's already an identified need that the county has previously identified. Another example of a need that the county has identified and done some work on is the wastewater that's down in the lower Richland area, and also, I believe, the northwest part of the county. And we've done phase 1 of that process, but then there's phase 2 and phase 3 that needs to be done, which by itself totals almost about $112 million when you look at the different components associated with that. So when you begin to get into some of the needs that we talked about versus the recommendations, the reason why I didn't put all those needs in here are because, for example, there are infrastructure funds that we hope to be able to assess or attain in order to get deal with wastewater treatment. For example, there's broadband funds that we understand are going to be available. So we hope to get funds from there. So we didn't put all those things in here because we want other resources to be tapped into. But when you get down into some of the recommendations here and the considerations, you will see they kind of mainly focus on public safety, which is one of the identified areas. They focus on community, which is one of the identified areas through a number of these initiatives here. And then they also focus on aspects of improving technology so that we can be more efficient in providing services that the citizens can reach without necessarily having to be hands-on with the county. So that's some of the overview when you're looking at the kind of the priorities. So it's a combination of things that the community spoke to, the council spoke to, and that the administrator is speaking to. And that when you look at the considerations and the recommendations, those are things that we want to talk about and flesh out to determine, do we want to support these things? At what level do we want to support them? But what we did was we put in there what the actual amounts were that we thought would need to be applied so that we would understand what the true ask was. So, Madam Chair, I'll stop there. Certainly open up for any initial questions before we kind of get into some more of the details. But I did want to provide you with that general initial overview.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And I'd like to recognize our chair, Mr. Walker, and the vice chair, Ms. Mackey, who joined us. Thank you so much for joining us at this we'll open up for any questions that the committee or anyone present may have for Mr. Brown at this time about the basic overview of the priorities that we've set forth as a county. Ms. Newton.
Technically, I think Mr. Walker was quicker on the draw with his microphone, and I'm happy to yield.
But I'm not on the committee, so please.
I'm not going to run out of questions, sir.
Well, in that case, then I'll take you up on your offer. I just have one. But thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, I just have one question. I'm looking at, I think this is item, let's see here. Item 5B, the Department of Social Services. And I see here where the recommendation from staff, I think is to earmark $35 million from the ARPA funds for.
Excuse me, Mr. Walker, if I could ask you to hold that specific question.
Sure, okay.
Because at this point, we're what we're doing now, we're in item 4A and B. Yeah, so, and we're going to get real deep into talking specifically about each one of these items.
Okay.
So if you would, please.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Newton.
And then I'll just say, the way I read it, it was up to, but that was an important 2 words for me.
Well, Ms. Newton, as a trained lawyer, when we hear up to, we typically mean we want to start at. That's where we usually think about starting.
I saw that too, so I just clung to the words. Yeah. So based on that, Ms. Barron, I have 2 questions, and one of them might be a question that's tabled for later. And the up to is actually important for my question, because I will admit that as I read the briefing packet, I didn't go back through and tally what, if anything, that would leave us. So one of my questions is if you could kind of give an overview based on what we've committed already, inclusive of the money that we decided to set aside for nonprofits and those other groups. If we were to do these items, what might our balance be? And again, it's complicated by whether or not you spend almost half of the funds on one thing or not. So we might need to pull that to the side. And then this may be something we talk about as we delve into each project, but I would be curious to know what levels of assurance we feel like we have with some of those other funds that we might be eligible for, because we're making some priority determinations based on the assumption that there are these other funds. And I just would like to have a better idea, knowing that nothing is certain, what was more promising.
So to answer your first question, I'll give you a quick rundown. I did not include this again in your packet, but the breakdown of the funds that we have spent are some items that we have provided a couple of times here, but you had the qualifying lump sum distribution grant awards, which roughly came about to $1,150,000. I'm rounding up. You had the employee stipends, which came to about 7.8 million. Almost 7.9. You had the recreation project with the tennis courts, 325,000. Alvin S. Glenn safety and security projects, about 3.3 million. Mental health program with the sheriff's department, 81,000. Utilities bad debt recovery for lost revenue, $1 million. Consulting, $100,000. Vaccination gift card program, $25,500. Grants management software, $687,000. HVAC for 2020 Hampton and 2000 Hampton, $5.2 million. So their total allocated was just a little bit short of $20 million, leaving you roughly about $60 million that have not been obligated. So if you were to approve the recommendations and considerations as listed today, you would have just a little bit shy of $10 million for any other related projects or support you want to provide using the American Rescue Plan dollars.
Quick follow-up. And maybe I missed it because it was included in that lump sum, but the funds that we I thought had voted to set aside for nonprofits to have access to. Was that included in the rundown that you just gave or not?
I think we talked about it. I don't know that you said that we're absolutely, I don't mean to say absolutely.
You know what? It was a
I don't
work
know that
session.
you
So
approved.
no action was taken. There seemed to be general support.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Well, that was my first question. Then I have a
Right.
second question that he's going to answer.
Tell me the second question. I remember the second question, but can you tell me again briefly?
Sure, that you talked about other funding that you
Yes,
thought we
yes,
might be
yes.
eligible for.
So the rural infrastructure funds associated with these projects, we believe that we will be eligible for those funds. There will be competitive funds. The thing about those projects, specifically Ms. Newton, are that the length of time that it would take. So we don't know whether or not we would get funds in a timely fashion, but we didn't include that in here because we generally believe we have a good competitive project for those funds. But I don't have a guaranteed time on that. And in the broadband, as we mentioned, their focus, according to the state at the time, was to focus first on those rural areas that really had no connectivity in order of priority before they got to someone like Richland County, who may have sparse connectivity in certain areas.
Right. And you got to a point that I would want to address later because I have real concerns just based on how those priorities are going, that the state broadband dollars are really going to come to a county that's as large and generally prosperous as Richland County, even though I have rural areas that I represent that rival some of those other areas in terms of lack of broadband access. So that's an assumption I'm not sure if I'm really comfortable making. But Ms. Barron, I just have one quick question for you. As you see the agenda, is this item 4B, other items, a place where we would talk about priorities that we don't see here, or where would you see that conversation happening?
Yes.
Okay.
So we wanted to lend an opportunity for anything that we have perhaps left out, or if there's something that you feel as though we need to include before we move on to item 5, which is the recommendation slash considerations that the administrator is bringing before this body.
Gotcha. Then if I could just plant a flag for broadband, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Absolutely noted. Ms. Mackey, you're recognized.
Thank you. So after hearing your list, you're saying we are estimating about 10 million left over. And I believe it might have been the last meeting, I can't remember, where we kind of talked about areas that we wanted to see. I think we talked a little bit about some food insecurities, housing needs. Are we saying, okay, now here's the 10 million, let's look at what we want to fund out of those categories, out of this 10 million? Is that what you're thinking as far as other items? Am I looking at that right?
So when we look at that $10 million, we note that we've kind of toyed around the idea of $2 million going to local nonprofits. So we also now have to determine, now that we have this $8 million, let's say we assume that we're going to award this $2 million. Now we have to, as a body, have to determine what else would we like to do with these funds.
Thank you. And I know we talked about it last time as I guess kind of in this group. I don't think we had all council members here, but in the committee we talked about it. I know there was a survey that was put out to the public as well. So based off of what we've heard from council members and committee, as well as the survey, have we kind of been able to come up with a synopsis that, okay, these are the top 3 to 4 kind of areas that have bubbled to the top that maybe we want to focus that 8 million on?
So I'll take a stab, and then also, Mr. Brown, feel free to make a comment. But what we've done is, when meeting with Mr. Brown and Ms. Thomas, we have this list of items that council members have brought forth, and then what we've also gathered from the committee. They have not been prioritized as a collective list. Mr. Brown and his team did do a synopsis and give us what the top, I think 5 to 7 from that group, some of which those cross over to the list that we as council members have. So what we would hope that we could take that list and Mr. Brown, I don't know if y'all have gotten to that point or not, but we did have a discussion about taking the entire list and then looking at creating some broad categories that therein we could pillow underneath each one. So we may have something like technology, and we're able to put broadband under there, Ms. Newton. We may have something to the essence of, children's services. And then we can put all those other items underneath there. Mr. Brown, you have anything to add?
So the survey itself was divided into separate categories. You had housing, public infrastructure improvement, public facilities, public safety and community services, economic and workforce development. Then we got down into downtown development revitalization. The top three were services for abused and neglected children, street improvements, and mental health. When you drop down to top five, you got support services and transitional housing. When you go over to parts of the conversation that the council had, we had mental health, which is there. We had youth services, which is there. We have senior assistance. We have workforce training, homelessness, public safety, right? So some of these things are crossing over. So one of the bigger aspects is something that you had really already decided, and it just happened to fall into the lap of this whole process, which we're going to get to down here soon, is DSS, which covers a number of these same related items. And so again, between the eligibility of ARP dollars, the information provided by the community and provided by council, we tried to marry those things up as best as we could. And then separate and apart from that, I said, what are things that the county has needs of that have already been identified that are usable for, are eligible for ARP dollars? So, and then that's kind of what I brought to you all, trying to do some combination and then leave funding available for more specific things that we might want to tackle again. One of the things I didn't say in the overview is, and I know we kind of overshadow it, but early on in the pandemic, you did give disaster recovery dollar for small businesses and nonprofits. You did give food insecurity dollars. Again, not saying it's not important to do it again, but I'm just saying in these initiatives that you have, some of these things you have given some funding to before ARP was ever an available solution. So we looked at all of those things and tried to say, how can we continue to provide across the board, not across the board, in a wide variety of support, but also be transformational in what we're doing? Because we've heard that a lot of times about being transformational. And so some of these projects are designed to do that. They're designed to change the course of how we interact with the community and how the community interacts with us.
Thank you for that overview. I think it would be great if we could just have that in a little quick one-sheeter to point out how we have been able to marry the public's input along with some of council's ideas and just note that we've put all those together. I think we do throw out a lot of ideas and priorities, but being able to see those spelled out and knowing that we're referring back to those when we look at taking action on some of these other items will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's a great point because as we move forward with even connecting to strategic plans, still are true to where we're going. And Mr. Brown said it, the word that came out in our retreat was transformational. So just to make that connection, if there isn't any further discussion, Mr. Walker.
If I may, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, I think I heard you say a moment ago that with respect to funding priorities, there are a couple rubrics or categories. I believe housing would be one, right?
Yes, sir. That was part of the survey.
Sure. And the other one would be workforce development. Is that correct?
That was one of them. Yes, sir.
So let's stick with housing here for a second. Is affordable housing, is that enumerated as one of the, I guess, items, if you will, under housing? And if so, have you and your team, I guess, thought about earmarking some of those funds for the affordable housing trust fund? I'm not saying for the establishment of an affordable housing trust fund, but I do know that we do have a housing trust fund here in Richland County, the Midlands Housing Trust Fund. And I know that I've expressed interest in seeing some of these ARPA funds earmarked to be allocated to the Midlands Housing Trust Fund, but obviously with certain stipulations that those funds be used strictly for Richland County residents. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Midlands Housing Trust Fund serves the Midlands area, so it's not just Richland County. But just wondering if that was something contemplated by your team before I go to my next question on workforce.
So I certainly contemplated after hearing the discussions that we would want to do something with housing. We talked about the funds have to be used, so having them sit would not be an eligible use. So I contemplated that of the remaining funds, that some of that would go towards the county's desire to support housing and affordable housing. How much remains to be seen, because it just depends on, are we going to try to spread as much as we can across as many platforms, or are we going to try to make a dent in something to change the trajectory of it? But I did anticipate that you would do so.
Follow.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the fund has to be used. What's that time frame again when the funds would have to be used?
The last time is the 2026 is that all the funds have to be expended.
I may, Madam Chair, rather have another question. And it's with respect to workforce development. And you mentioned something about training. I know the last meeting that, the work session rather, that we had regarding, priorities for ARPA funds. I believe I had mentioned at that time, the possibility of some of these funds being earmarked for tuition assistance for folks who are residents of Richland County, but who decide to attend the technical college here, Midlands Tech, to be exact. And when I think of workforce development, I know that Midlands Technical College is, is very integral when it comes to training our workforce here in Richland County. And I do know that, again, there's been, at least lately, there's been a lot of talk about tuition free on college. And oftentimes it comes up when we're discussing our technical schools. So has any thought been given to that, Mr. Brown, by your team? And I know the funds have to be expended by a certain time. But we have 4 years from between 2022
they have to be obligated by 2024.
Oh, by 2024.
They have to be obligated.
Obligated by 2024. Okay.
And then spent by 2026.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but would it be problematic for some of these funds to be earmarked for tuition assistance in light of the fact that these funds have to be obligated by 2024?
Potentially, you would be relying on the entity in which you provide the funds to, if assuming that you would say, we're going to provide you these funds as a sub-recipient. You then have to meet these requirements. You would be really in the hands of those individuals. So as long as they could spend those funds accordingly and have the proper documentation, which would be the same thing as the recipient has to have, then you would be fine. So to your question, there were really 3 areas that were kind of talked about with that. One was, to your point, tuition assistance. There was also student loan payments that were mentioned. In addition to, there was workforce training. So we had already received early on a request for, I think it was like $12 million from in the area of workforce training or tuition assistance. So I think their program, I think there's enough where it could be used. But again, the question from my mind really depends on the amount that you're providing in that area. And I anticipated there would be some amount. Again, I just don't know what the appetite is for how much of those funds we want to put in that category. So I think it could be spent after being obligated. Because if you obligate it now, they can start spending it now. And I think you can have that spent in 4 years. But it just really depends on how much we're talking about. Yes, sir.
Madam.
Thomas, I saw that you set up. Is there something else that we need to insert here?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much. To the point with tuition assistance, it would have to be very focused, because keep in mind that this has to be related to the COVID pandemic. So there are some income qualifications that would have to be set up there, and we would have to work very carefully with the groups to make sure that we follow all the rules of compliance to ensure they are impacting a group that was negatively impacted by COVID-19.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Further that we need to add here? I would like to say that I think that as we move forward, once we get to item 5, and we start to make some decisions as to whether or not what we're wanting to take action on or not, it's going to really be up to this body to give Mr. Brown even more so specific directives. So he's brought to us today what we requested from our last work session. And so we know that even if we approve everything on this list, there's still $10 million that we need to discuss. But at this point, what I'd like for us to do is to be able to discuss what Mr. Brown has brought forth, and let's see where what we have an appetite for, what we don't, and then take this one step further, because we're not talking about $5 here. We're talking about $60 million, and we want to make sure that we are definitely doing the best that we can for the citizens of Richland County. So with that, item 4B, I know Ms. Newton wanted to put down there broadband as another reminder there. I did take note to just the reiteration from Chair Walker about the Housing Trust Fund or supporting it in some way, and then workforce development. Are there any other items that we would like to see as priorities? Ms. Newton.
I guess now I'll pause on what I was going to say. Thank you.
I just want to emphasize again what we talked about as far as things that were in the survey from the public or that we talked about that maybe tie in. So I'm not going to name specific other priorities, but I just want to refer back to that survey.
Absolutely.
As that being in that category.
Absolutely. And just so you're comfortable with that, that is how we're moving forward. We're moving forward with those items that was in the survey and those items that council brought forth as the priorities. Ms. Newton?
Being inquisitive.
Okay. So given that, what we'll do now is we're going to move forward with item 5, which is items for action. And I'll say items for action or not. And that is I've probably said this like 4 times already, so I'll say it again because I want us to be clear about what this list is. This list is what we asked Mr. Brown to bring to us. And so these are items for us to consider or to recommend, or they are the considerations or they are recommendations. We decide this can be an all-inclusive list. This can be an a la carte list. But as Mr. Brown is going to go through each item and discuss it, I want us to be able to really take an open look at it to see, is this something that we want to do? And noting that none of these items are time sensitive. So if it's something that we need more information on, or if it's something that, we need to sit with for a little bit and then come back and have further discussion, I think that is definitely okay. But just keeping in mind that we do have, even though we do have $60 million, we want to make sure that it's encumbered in enough time so that we can spend it also in enough time. Mr. Brown?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. Also, as we move into items for action, under item 4B, at a future meeting, Madam Chair, I'll have our state lobbyists come and talk about some of their efforts and how things are looking related to that, just so this group can get a feel for what that looks like.
Thank you.
No problem. So the initial item 5A, is an item that was before you at a previous meeting. And I don't see whether or not a personnel from the solicitor's office is on, but one of the questions or one of the larger questions that were asked were about the split. You know, the solicitor's office has more than one area that he oversees, and was the request, you know, reflective of Richland County. And so in your packet, what you will see is an amended request from the solicitor's office, which takes into account that split. And there's certainly a breakdown from there. And a second here, I'm looking at the amount. So the original amount was 1.2, but that is not the, okay, perfect. But the requested amount has been amended to reflect the Richland County portion. So you may recall that that was the initial request that they made. And the questions came in as to what about Richland County is unique to Richland County in your request. They went back, looked at that, and then provided us a new request. So I understand that they're on the line, Madam Chair. So if we could recognize the solicitor's office, I would appreciate that.
Yes, the solicitor's office is recognized at this time. And if you would, please state your name because we can't see you on the screen here. And then if you would, please just point us to the page where the amended amount is. I'm thinking it starts on page 32.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Justin Martin. I'm an analyst with the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office. The amended amount start at page 32. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You may proceed.
The amounts that we're looking at trying to get a new case management system for our office. We deal with a tremendous amount of various crimes. And the way that we are managing our cases currently is a little problematic because we receive a tremendous amount of data. Evidence these days can not only include incident reports and photos of crime scenes and things of that nature, but they also can include phone dumps, phone reports that can be very large, body cam video, interviews, surveillance video from various sources, public and private, and all of these items can take up a tremendous amount of space. The case management system that we utilize currently does not have the capacity to store all of these items in a central repository, which requires our office to move around and find hard copies of disks, which can become damaged and unusable. And it requires our office to spend a tremendous amount of time to locate those items, re-request those items from law enforcement. This case management system would allow us to put all of our evidence into a central repository and help make our workflows significantly more streamlined. We lost some revenue because of the coronavirus. We were unable to, there was less people able to enter the building and participate in our diversion programs, which we can utilize to generate funding for various upgrades that our office would require to do business. But we took a hit from that coronavirus and we were not able to bring in as much funding from those programs.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, if you look on page 36 and 37 of your packet, you will see the pricing proposal kind of broken down there to kind of pick up where the solicitor's office is speaking to. That kind of shows you what it is they're asking for and the funding amount and what that funding amount looks like. And then it shows you the breakdown of how those funds will be spent over the course of a 5-year period. The last thing I'll say, and I'll certainly let you ask any additional questions of solicitor's office, is some of these technology items that we're talking about trying to address, and this is one of them, is looking at what's going to have to be addressed in the coming years. And some of these things you will more than likely have to do in some shape, form, or fashion in your budget, but you have an opportunity here to give yourself time to build into some of those future needs rather than having all those hit you at one time. And the best way I could describe that, for those of you who may not be familiar, we went through a process with one of our very important systems here, our computer aid mass appraisal system. And that system had some end of life related issues, but it wasn't until it was a very severe concern that we were actually able to go in and address it. And fortunately, we were able to come out okay, but it could have been very bad. So as you look at some of these technology requests, also consider the difference between doing something like this now and then at a point to when it's a critical issue and then you're having to address it because you have no choice. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Justin, on that, but hopefully that provided some additional assistance for the committee to consider.
Thank you. Before I open it up to my colleagues, I did have a question, and I know we've kind of talked around this, but all of these items that we have before us, the main question that I have is, now that we are, having an opportunity to buy things that perhaps we've put off because we just didn't have the extra funds or whatever the case may be, now that we're putting them in our budget, how do we anticipate being able to maintain these expenses that we are now, as I've been saying, with our Christmas money? We're getting it with our Christmas money, but when Christmas is gone, how are we going to maintain these items in our budget? And can our budget be able to hold these particular items? And so we can talk specifically to this, the solicitor's office proposal.
Correct. So the ideal here would be that you could budget for that ongoing maintenance and you literally have 5 years to plan for that. So you can build that into your budget because you've identified that as one of the priorities. The other thing to consider is if Christmas didn't come and you had to both get the system and pay for the ongoing maintenance, now you're paying more over the longer period of time, or you're probably failing to do something.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Livingston?
I'm just trying to understand what's being asked. I had page 9 kind of mocked up, and then I got to page 37 and I got kind of confused. 36 and 37. So can someone explain to me on it's 204 in one document. It's on page 90 in our packet, page 9 of 280. And you have some items listed there, and it comes to the total of $1.242 million. Now that is the request, correct?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
No. Because
that was the previous request, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Mr. Livingston. That was the previous request, sir. When the solicitor's office came back and responded to the list of questions that were provided to them through the committee, which is listed in the packet as well, they came back and broke out the information on page 36 at the bottom of that, where it talks about the total first year cost. And then it shows you over time how that's broken down on page 37. So the ask is not the 1.2 million. Justin, will you tell them what the actual ask is and where they can see that in the packet, please, sir? Or just tell them the amount, not show them where it is in the packet.
Yes, and we came to the understanding after that we submitted this that that these funds had to be expended by 2026. So that would mean that the year 5 item on page 37, it says final total for Richland County would not be included for this ask, but the requested amount would amount to $618,585.20. So it would be the year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4 at the very final line on page 37.
Could you repeat that number, please?
$618,585.20.
On page 37 of your packet, Mr. Livingston, you would mark out year 5 and you would total up years 1, 2, 3, and 4 is what Mr. Martin was communicating in his conversation with us.
Let's see why I was confused now. Because considering year 5,
We're not asking.
so that money would have to be budgeted from perhaps the general fund budget for year 5.
That's correct. That's what I would assume.
That's
Mr.
the
Chair.
amount that if we can take that's the amount we would have to budget beginning of year 5. Is that clear? Is that accurate?
I would anticipate that our office would be able to secure some grant funding that would be able to bring the cost associated with maintaining this system down. But pinpointing the actual amount of grant funding that we could secure within our office to offset that cost is a moving target that I'm not really comfortable to give you an estimate on.
Right now, that cost is projected to be what, 114,000?
For year 5, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, that helps. Madam Chair.
Sir, Ms. Newton?
Thank you. So to clarify, so that I'm clear, the $618,000 that we're talking about represents the 80% portion for Richland County. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then do you have a commitment from Kershaw County to pay the balance, the other 20%, or have you identified other sources of funding?
I would hand it over to Mr. Pauling.
Yes, Madam Councilwoman, we do have that funding. Is that municipal?
So is that funding from Kershaw County or is that funding from other sources for my information?
We have funding from Kershaw County and we have funding from other sources.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
As a follow-up, I would like a little more specifics. So you have funding from Kershaw and other sources. Could you share with us what those particular numbers are?
Yes, ma'am. Just in year 1, you can see halfway down the column, we've got our body worn camera grant funding at $10,000. And then the IPS, which is the Innovative Prosecution Solution Grant. That's the big grant we got this year for this project. It's $340,000. So that will go into year 1. And that's why the year 1 cost is relatively low for such a expensive database. And then going forward, we do operate programs within the solicitor's office in our diversions, expungements, AEP, TEP, where we also generate revenues from the community for helping them in diverting their criminal cases. And those fundings can also be used for this project.
Okay, so I really hate that I asked this question now because
Yes,
it looks, when I see this chart, I see the $10,000 as a portion of the Richland County portion of this amount, not as the Kershaw portion. What I'm thinking that what I'm seeing on page 37 is solely reflective of Richland County and not inclusive of Richland County and Kershaw County?
Yeah, the body worn camera, that grant is a Richland County grant. The IPS grant is a circuit grant that was awarded to us as the Fifth Circuit for both counties.
Okay, I'll just leave it there just for, but that's really not clear. It's really not clear. And you did not mention Kershaw's, I'll say buy-in to this. What specifically are they putting forth here?
It's in there. It's under the first question. Page 32.
Yeah, and Madam Council, we did divide it with an 80-20 split between the two counties within the Fifth Circuit based on their active caseloads within our office.
Okay, so I think it's safe to assume that, and I'm assuming, but you don't have an amount that they put forth. That's what I'm looking for. And maybe I'm just overlooking it.
Are you, for the solicitor's office, so I'm looking at page 37, and I'll be frank, I missed it the first few times I looked at this document until about 5 minutes ago. There is the
79,000?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
first tier.
Right. So my question is, of that $79,000, what has Kershaw County committed to? Because here we're having a conversation about Richland County committing to, nearly $620 million. I just want to know what the buy-in is at Kershaw County.
I believe our ask for Kershaw, which is supposed to be presented, I think, in the next 2 weeks, is an amount equal to that among what they currently provide our office. So we're asking for additional funds to help with this project and in that amount.
Okay, so for me, I would like to revisit this item once we get a little more information as to how what Kershaw is contributing here as well, because I would hate for Richland County to pay for a system that we're saying that is just for Richland County, and then Kershaw County is able to benefit from the system that's solely been paid for Richland County. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I just chime in? And I don't take a position one way or the other, but I think it's important to highlight that the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office, Mr. Gibson, Solicitor Gibson is the solicitor for both counties. And so Richland County and Kershaw County both fall within the Fifth Circuit. I'm not sure how that sort of cuts with respect to ARPA funds, but I do know that Solicitor Gibson, he can't, I guess, as far as the services that his office provides, he can't, I guess, sort of divorce himself, from Kershaw County when he was elected, to be Fifth Circuit Solicitor. It's both of those counties. But again, I'm not sure. And perhaps that's something for administration to sort of grapple with and figure out with respect to the ARPA funds. But I do know that, this is something that would, it's something I'm sure that the solicitor's office needs. And it's not that this would be, I guess, a benefit that Kershaw County would be getting to the detriment of Richland County residents and citizens when considering that he is the solicitor for the Fifth Circuit, which encompasses both counties. So,
Thank you for that. And I please don't take it as if I don't want the solicitor to have what he needs in order to be effective in his job. And I do understand that. I'm just merely saying that we have set forth that we want to be good stewards of the dollars that we have. And there are guidelines that we have to follow. And one of which is that the funds that we expend go to Richland County residents. So we are getting close to the 4 o'clock hour. And I know we do have another meeting here. And I think that for the sake of discussion, because the next item that we have will be talking about the DSS facility. So what I would like to say to this body is that as we move forward with these items, that we make a recommendation to say, this is something that we'd like to do. However, we need more information, or this is something that we'd like to table. So when we come back together, we will be working off the very same agenda, clerk's office, with the same packet. Yeah, I am a tree hugger. Please hold on to your packets. And if you want to rescind the agendas and update them, but I don't know that it's needed for us to reprint packets of the same information unless the administration has some additional information they'd like to include in those packets.
If there was supplemental information, we could just provide that. You would not need to reprint the packet, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So at this, high five. So we are at this time, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So just quick before we adjourn, because one of the things I was thinking here is I know I have some questions about some of the other items. I probably will go ahead and submit some of those to the administrator so we can have some feedback on those.
That's an excellent idea.
If we can do that, it might be helpful for us to get through the process a little quicker next time.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Livingston. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.